Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. This is a podcast to inspire, uplift, show forth the love of God, and help usher in the spiritual awakening. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers. I'm actually sitting in a Zoom room because I was supposed to be interviewing someone. He wasn't able to do StreamYard, so we were going to go to Zoom the next week. And he's not here again, so I don't know. But I thought I'd just talk off the fly about what I'm thinking about then, because the show must go on. I need to put out an episode tomorrow. But I have been thinking about something. Been talking to this guy on YouTube, and he's coming from you'd say a biblical or Christian perspective. I've used that loosely. And he's arguing for polygamy. He's saying, or as he says, polygyny, because there's within the umbrella of polygamy, there's different categories. Polygyny is one man having multiple wives. Poly Polyandry is one woman having multiple husbands. And then there's polyamory, which is kind of a group relationship or group marriage. It's kind of free flowing. But when we talk about this concept of polygamy or polygyny, he's basically making an argument that, okay, in the Old Testament, all of the, well, not all of them, but most of the Old Testament patriarchs and most of the kings, they had polygamous marriages or polygynous marriages, and they were married to multiple wives. And he's saying, well, God worked through them. This was blessed. This was ordained. God even brought children to them. And then in the Mosaic law, there's regulations. So if it's a sin, why would he regulate it? And that's essentially the gist of his argument. And of course, most Christians would come back and say, well, when you look in the New Testament, look at the teachings of Jesus when he was talking about marriage and divorce. And he says, do you not know that God created them male and female? And that Jesus basically gave very uh, strict rules on when you can divorce and remarry because he didn't really want divorce. And Jesus points back to Genesis 2:26, where it says, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. And of course, the pattern representing marriage, of course, would be Adam and Eve, which is, one to one monogamy. And essentially, that's how the arguments go against it, that God's ideal and God's plan was that we would have one spouse, one wife to one husband, etc. And when you get to the Apostle Paul, First Corinthians 7, verse 2 says, to avoid fornication, let each man have his own wife, let each woman have her own husband. And of course, he's got arguments around these and, gets into the Greek, but the essence of what the verse says there is still in the singular, a man to a wife to a husband. You can't really get around that because he tries to look at the word own for man and own for woman in First Corinthians 7:2 and tries to make a lot of hay about it, but it doesn't really change the essence. It's a man to a wife to her husband, singular. So the ideal, of course, is monogamy, a monogamous marriage. And I think what's interesting is that you look at the essence of what is marriage supposed to be about? And I think this is kind of where you get into the difference between like the Old Testament patriarchs versus the New Testament and what we have today is that so much of when the Old Testament, when you saw polygamy, and it was usually very wealthy men that were wealthy patriarchs like Abraham or wealthy kings like Solomon and David. Marriage in the ancient world, ancient Israel not being excluded, was primarily an economic relationship. So I would get married to, in many cases, somehow benefit myself economically. This would especially be true if you were a wealthy individual. This would be your mindset. So, how can I grow my tribe? How can I expand my wealth? How can I make more diplomatic ties with other nations? And so you'd have things like, a prince or a king would marry many princesses to essentially expand their kingdom and expand their wealth and power. So it was more of an economic and social relationship. Whereas, like in the New Testament, besides monogamy just being the ideal, you start to see a different mindset come in because marriage now is about love. Because Paul says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And that's the primary focus that a husband has towards his wife is love. It's not, you know, husbands try to find a wife that's going to be the most economically and socially um, beneficial for you. So there's a different mindset going on and then starting to go on in the New Testament than what you see in the Old Testament. And it isn't to say that we don't obviously learn from the examples and the teachings of Abraham and David and all these people, because obviously God used them, they were blessed. But their concept of marriage was operating, let's just be honest, on a lower level. They were operating on an economic level. And for someone who's in Christ, someone who's supposed to be a believer in Christ, the image is now changed. It's transformed, where the primary focus is love. So I'm not marrying into, I'm not entering into a marriage to see what I can benefit from economically speaking. Like if I'm a woman, I'm not looking for necessarily the richest guy, or if I'm a guy, I'm not looking to acquire more properties or influence. The focus is on finding someone that you can love and that you can care for and commit to. And that's pretty much the idea that obviously, at least in theory, most people describe to today. And that concept comes from what changed in the New Testament. He tries to make it about it was a Greco-Roman standard. Well, maybe it was, but it's a better standard. It just is because love is to triumph over everything else. And that's basically the Christian teaching. And so love is our focus now. And when you get into marriage, even outside of the polygamous thing, when you get into like divorce and whatever, um, is love always really the focus? Because we would say that love's the most important thing, and it is. But do we really make it the most important thing? And we'd have to see that, well, not really. A lot of times it is about what can I get out of it. And I think the whole cycle of marriage and divorce, remarriage, marriage, divorce, remarriage, it's essentially a similar mindset to polygamy. We're just sort of doing it consecutively instead of concurrently. So I'll have multiple wives. I'll just have one at a time over many years and decades, or I'll have multiple husbands and I'll just have it over many years and decades. So it's kind of the same mindset because you're kind of looking at what can I get out of it? Maybe not necessarily economically, but what's going to serve me best rather than how can I focus my love on this other person and be faithful to this other person. So the divorce and remarriage of our modern times is somewhat similar to kind of the polygamous mindset that this guy's into. So obviously the ideal for marriage is love. And something that I've come to when I've been meditating is that there's basically two kinds of marriage. There's obviously the legal marriage, the one that's recognized by governments and that's performed in churches and things like that, and nothing wrong with them. But it essentially establishes a social and economic contract that creates rights and responsibilities between the two parties. And to some extent, maybe you need that. But then there's a marriage of the heart, where the two hearts are woven together so tightly and so profoundly that to split it up is unthinkable. It'd be like disowning your children. It's for most of us, it'd be like never going to happen. So that's a key point. And we would like to see both present, but they're not always present. Sometimes you have a legal contractual marriage, but you don't really have a marriage of the heart. And there are occasions where you have a marriage of the heart, but no legal contractual marriage, so that can and often does happen. And maybe you're in a marriage right now, and maybe you've got a legal contractual marriage, and that makes sense economically and, survivor benefits and things like that. But do you have a marriage of the heart? Are you woven together so tightly that you're not looking simply to see what I can gain out of this person, but you're so committed in love to them that you would never divide from them? Kind of like your children in a sense, it'd be like you look at your children, you love them, you'd never leave them. You're not generally looking to see, well, what can I get from them? You know, it's like you love them unconditionally and your heart is completely towards them. You would never split up. Do you have that kind of love with your spouse? Do you have that kind of love with another person? And that's really the essence of what a marriage is and should be about, the one of the heart. And it's kind of interesting is I think um the guy arguing for polygamy just sort of misses the boat because he's like, well, I have a right to do it, and he makes his arguments and everything, and it's like, well, if you genuinely were loved, if you genuinely loved and were committed to someone and they were the most important person in your life, why would you ever want to, just take on a second wife? Your love would be so deep, your faith and commitment, loyalty to them would be so strong that you wouldn't even want to go there with it, even if you felt that you had the right, quote unquote, to do it. Of course, he doesn't believe women have the right to marry multiple husbands. That that's totally out of the question in his mind, But you know, why would you even go there with it? Because I think if you have a certain level of spiritual maturity and you have a certain depth of love for your spouse, it'd be like, I'm not even going to go there. You know what I mean? Even if I thought I had the right to do it, I wouldn't even go there with it, you know. Um, and of course they came back, well, you can have multiple children and love all of them. It's like, well, we all know there's a difference because within a within a marital relationship, you have a degree of romance and intimacy that just doesn't work for multiple parties beyond just the two. It doesn't fly. We know innately that that is not the way it's supposed to be, that, yeah, there's only supposed to be two individuals there, not, you know, a party. So I don't think that really flies, but I think that's something to think about. And, I was thinking for a long time about coming on here and doing a talk on polygamy, and I thought, okay, that's just going to sound weird, you know. I mean, who's in the polygamy? 99% of people think like that. That's just crazy. But when you start to think about what is the essence of marriage, well, okay, well, that has relevancy to everybody, and we see it in the larger context of like marriage, divorce, remarriage, and we see it in the breakup of relationships. Really get back to that issue. What is the core essence of a real marriage? Love, love knitting two people together. And I think that's the essence of what a marriage is. And maybe you're not married today, but if you're in a romantic relationship with someone, maybe that's where you want to focus yourself is on knitting your two hearts together in love so that you create the ultimate lifelong bond. And it's something to think about, um, even if you're not married, even if you're not in a romantic relationship, you're completely single, but maybe one day you'd like to be. Or even if you don't want to be, maybe you have children or other people around you that want to do that, and you could encourage them to make your primary focus to knit your hearts together in love. Make love the essence of that relationship. I got some exciting things too. We'll close out and I'll do a little meditation on relationships. But I've got something exciting. I've got a lot of things in the works. I decided to go with Buy Me a Coffee. I've had it for a couple months now, but I haven't done anything. And I'm creating like a membership list where you can be part of Jay's VIP membership club. And I'm going to be giving all kinds of perks and special guided meditations and discounts and whatnot on my books and courses and stuff like that. And I got a lot of more courses I'm going to be designing, give it some behind the scenes stuff. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to be like just for a low monthly rate of $10 a month, you can have access to a lot of things and you can really learn a lot more about meditation. I'm going to have like special talks and things like that, and really be a mentor in this VIP membership club. So I'm going to encourage you to join that. I'll have a link um, to the Buy Me a Coffee. And of course, the thing is with Buy Me a Coffee too, you don't necessarily have to do a membership. You can just give like a one-time donation, things like that. You appreciate the work that I do with meditation and with the other things I talk about. And you can just make a donation, a one-time donation. It allows you to do that. And it's kind of like Patreon, but after looking at the pros and cons, it's a lot better. It's a lot easier for people to give to. It's easier for the person that's setting it up. There's less fees and expenses associated with it. So it's just better all the way around to do Buy Me a Coffee. And that's what I've seen. So it seems like everybody just automatically goes to Patreon, but Buy Me a Coffee is a better one, in my opinion. And of course, you can always support me too by getting one of my books. I have a meditation for everyone, which will teach you how to meditate, go through step by step and all the different things related to it. I have a very concrete approach where, just this is how you do it. This is kind of the ins and outs. It's not real fluffy in terms of a lot of philosophy and whatnot with it. It's pretty concrete. There's maybe a little bit of philosophy, but not too much. And I have my book, you know, The Parallels Between the Bible and the Near-Death Experience, Heaven's Truth, that you can purchase. And we've got a devotional book, Walk as Children of the Light. You can purchase any of those books on Amazon. There's links to all these things below. Buy Me a Coffee and my books. And you can do my course. I got Meditation Basics on Udemy that'll just basically take you all the way through. It's 6 hours of instruction with meditations and everything. It's pretty awesome. But we'll go ahead and do the meditation now. So let's close your eyes, get comfortable. Let's take a few deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose deeply. And exhale. Breathe in through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. And in this next breath, just imagine yourself breathing in pure white light. This white light has love, peace, and compassion. Breathe it in. And exhale stress, anxiety, animosity. That exhale is like breathing out black smoke. Breathe in white light of love. Exhale anxiety and stress. Taking one final deep breath of love. And exhale. Now imagine you're on a beach. Sun is shining. The waves are rippling by. You might hear birds in the background. It's very warm and comfortable. You can feel the white sand on your toes. Imagine you're with your husband or wife, your significant other, special person in your life. Or imagine you're with a person you'd like to be your special person. Just imagine yourself holding their hand. Allow yourself to feel love for them. Remember a time in your relationship when you really felt in love with them or love for them. What did that feel like? When was that? Was that at the beginning of your relationship? Does this still happen now? But think about a time when you felt like really in love with this person or really a loving moment with this person. Just take a minute to take that in. Now look into their eyes and say deep within your soul that you love them. Really allow yourself right now to feel a deep and abiding love for them. Maybe even more love than you have ever felt for them, even when you were madly in love. Feel it within your heart and your soul. Allow yourself to feel deeper love. Allow yourself to have your heart be knitted together with this other person. Because no matter what the circumstances are with you or with this other person, you can choose deep within your heart and soul to simply love them. Love them in spite of their flaws, their frailties, their shortcomings. Just love them. Love them like you would your child. Love them like you would a pet with no conditions, no strings attached. They may come in one day and be the biggest bear or ogre out there, but you know what? I'm choosing in my heart to just love them. Feel that love. Feel it overwhelm within your soul. My decision to love them isn't even contingent on whether they love me back or love me back in a way that I think they should. I'm just going to simply love them unconditionally, no limits, no restrictions. Just do one affirmation and put the special person's name in this. The person's name, I love you with all my heart, my soul. I love you with my heart and my soul. I love you with my heart and my soul. With the person's name. You mean the world to me. You always have. You mean the world to me. You always have. I just recognize that God brought this person to you for a reason, and that you can just simply release love into their life. And anytime you get upset with them or they get upset with you, take yourself back to this place, the place of love deep within your soul, and remember it. And the next time you see this special person, give them a hug or a kiss and tell them that you love them. Now we're going to start to come back to the room. Let's take in one final deep breath. Breathe in through your nose. And exhale. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.